Okay, well, it's a pleasure to welcome back Molly Williamson, who has spoken here a couple of times before. She's a retired Foreign Service officer whose career focused on the Middle East, which is obviously very much a topic today. And she's now a visiting scholar at the Middle East Institute and other places, and a frequent speaker at various venues. And I think you'll see that Molly is very much worth talking to and listening to. So without further ado, please, Molly.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. What a treat it is to be invited back and to have a chance to follow up some of our chats. I think last time I was here, we talked about demography and diplomacy, and the time before that, I think we talked about the Middle East. It's kind of safe to talk about Middle East in chaos because on any given day of the week, I am confident there will be chaos. So that is relevant to today's conversation about the policy nightmare of energy, environment, and economy. This is a policy nightmare that affects every single capital on the planet. So it's not just about us. It's a global issue. It's a problem that plagues everybody. Let me start with a little anecdote about when I was Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. I was rented out by the State Department to the Department of Defense to talk about Middle East issues, and so we worried about that. Anyway, I was wandering around the Pentagon, on the three ring, where the Secretary's suite of offices, and I was lost because, well, I get lost. My husband says I'm a mathematical marvel because at any given intersection, anybody has a 50-50 chance of making the right turn. I make the wrong turn every single time. So anyway, I'm in the Pentagon and I'm lost. I'm looking for the ladies' room. And I'm lost and I'm wandering around and there's a placard that caught my attention. Big placard. And it was a time, not a unique period. I think people have heard about the problems of stovepiping within the defense structure for a long time, for years and years and years. And in any case, this had to do with how complicated, how hard it is for people within the military system, the uniformed system, to communicate. And the way they did that on this placard was to show the many ways a three-word command was interpreted by the different uniformed services. That three-word command was secure that building. And on this placard, it showed that if you are a Marine, you know that secure that building means you will attack at dawn, seize and hold. If you are the Army, secure that building means you will paint a whole lot of rocks white, you will establish a perimeter, and develop a sentry duty roster 24/7. If you are the Navy, secure that building means you will lock all the doors and windows and go away. And if you are the Air Force, secure that building means you will Negotiate a long-term lease with option to buy. Now, everybody's an American military uniformed serviceman. Nobody has talked to a civilian yet. Nobody has talked to a congressman yet. And certainly nobody has talked to a foreigner yet. And you can see how complex the three-word command of secure that building can be interpreted and implemented. Can you imagine the nightmare if you think your task is to negotiate a long-term lease and instead you've attacked at dawn? Right? And I say this, I tell you this little anecdote so that you'll keep this in the back of your mind. It's not just a complication among the uniformed services. It's global. It's not just among American citizens. It's global. It's not just for one mission, never mind three-word mission. It's a complex nightmare of factors, of deliberations, and we all think we understand what we're doing, where we're coming from, because we all know the mission, 3 words, right? Think how much more complicated it is if we don't know the mission, or if we don't know the other guy's mission. So the complexity that I want you to keep kind of simmering in the back of your mind is that next level of frustration and contest and chaos that governs not just the policy making, though that's certainly one of the things I want us to focus on today, but on how we deal with what we think is the reality of circumstance, the reality of what we are about to do, what it is we are in the mission of, what it is that we are tasked with. And it just gets worse and worse, gets more and more complex, and people become more and more dug in because they think they know the mission and the other guy's wrong-headed. Probably shouldn't even be in the business, right? So just keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to go through a lot of different factors this morning. I want us to talk about, yes, the policy nightmare. It can go a very long time. These policy negotiations in every capital of the world, this is not unique to the United States, are complex and frustrating beyond words. But I also want to add a discussion about where we are on energy as we are engaged in a non-war with Iran, because it is profound and it adds to the complexity of the factors that go into the policy deliberations. So, to move along. When we talk about energy and environment and finances, that whole universe of things, think of it as a big Venn diagram, right? So you have one big circle called energy security. Everybody wants it, everybody needs it, and we're all worried that if we have a little bit of it, we're going to lose it. The other guy's going to get more than we have, all kinds of frustrations. One big circle called energy security. Another big circle called environmental responsibility. We are now very mindful of the environmental impact of human behavior, and there is huge debate, huge dispute about what that means, what's the causation, what are the remedies. All of those issues are like secure that building, only it's much more complex. And that's the second big circle. The third big circle is called economic feasibility. You can have energy security without question among all sorts of resource potentials. But if it's going to cost you everything you have, you're going to say it's too expensive. You can get energy that maybe is cheap enough, but it's dirty as the dickens. And now you're saying, well, maybe that's a trade-off we can't dare contemplate with respect to the health impacts for our community, our country, our planet, right? And then there are energy possibilities that are cheap, but they don't fit with security because they're not reliably available on a consistent basis, or they're only available if there's no cloud in the sky. Well, you know, that's going to make life tough. What the policymaker gets to work with is not the whole circle of energy security, not the whole circle of environmental responsibility, not the whole circle of economic feasibility, but only that tiny little space where all three circles overlap. So it's got to be cheap enough, it's got to be available enough, it's got to be reliable, and it's got to be safe, available. A whole lot of wonderful things out there, and we could talk weeks about all kinds of options that at the moment are not in that policy range of being available or cheap or safe. So how to move that in and out is itself a whole different semester of discussions. So keeping in mind, we're looking at a huge Venn diagram. What we have more or less is a consensus within, among about 193 of 195 countries. That consensus is the energy usage that humans consume has a relationship with environmental degradation. There's a big debate over how much causation and what the remedies might look like and so on. But there is a recognition of that relationship. That was codified in 2015, largely through the leadership and the cooperation between the United States and China, the number one and number two consumers of energy and producers of environmental degradation. And so with that leadership, with that combined agreement, the United States and China basically led the world into a codification of the realities of the relationship between energy and environment. That was codified in 2015, and nobody knew that we would walk away from it in 2016. We then came back to it in 2020, and we have again left it in 2024. So the compelling nature of that agreement has been eroded substantially. What it involved at the time, a commitment that still a great many countries would like to see go forward, is a commitment to reduce the amount of degradation to the Earth's atmosphere by a substantial amount. Substantial is one of those secure that building thing, you know? It can be all kinds of steps. So they picked something. Is it arbitrary? You betcha. Could it be something else? Absolutely. But the arbitrary agreement of what it is that we are about, what's the goal, right, is to get back to a level of environmental degradation that predates the industrial era, which saw huge increases in carbon dioxide emissions. And the intent there was to put brakes on it, right? Does it have to be that year, that movement of industrialization? No, it could be all kinds of things. What drove this was nobody knew. And what nobody knew what the levels were and what became critical. What we ended up with in terms of baseline requirements came because the United States had numbers. We had the better science. But is it arbitrary? Yes. Could it be something else? Yes. Could people make a case for any number of developments? Yes. So it's a little mushy right from the very beginning, right? Secure that building. What building? Where is that building? We don't see that building, right? So right away there's an issue. What it meant was it gave people a standard, a thing to aim for. And so the process that was generated by the Paris Accords of 2015 was that all countries dedicate themselves to that goal, right? How to do it would be left to each country. Each country would assess its own situation, so it's not imposed on anybody, right? And the idea was each country would do what it could and show how it was going to do it to help be contributing members in the endeavor to reduce the degradation of the planet's erosion. Now, let's put that aside for a minute. It's not going away. And keep in mind that we are looking at a planet which is showing tremendous shifts in population growth, in the development of better economic standards. What do I mean by that? We are now looking at a planetary population of more than 8 billion people. 8 billion people. What we didn't know, and this is a good thing, right? We didn't know that roughly half of that global population was going to be in the middle class. So we're looking at economic capability and growth by 2035. And we are already in a situation where the growth of the global middle class, and we could spend a long time talking about what the middle class means, but the bottom line is there is consensus on that kind of economic capability, the educational capabilities, all of these wonderful things that meant that more and more of this population of 8 billion people actually had an investment in the stability of the planet, had an investment in seeing opportunities grow for yet more people, and seeing, having an investment in growing health and capability and opportunity for more and more of that population. The thing about this is the more people get into the middle class, which is a good thing. You want people to have an investment in the stability of the planet. You want people to have an investment in the future of the planet. When people don't have that commitment, don't have that investment, they are more prone to be vulnerable to chaos, to the kind of disaffection and unhappiness that promotes instability, revolutions, wars, right? So you want to see that. But as this grows as this population becomes ever more financially capable of doing things, of gaining stability and opportunity, so also do they consume more energy. And in the process of consuming more energy, so also do they pollute. They produce more greenhouse gases that contribute to the degradation of the planet's atmosphere. So good that we're growing in development, but the concomitant impact immediately on both energy consumption and pollution production come with that. And what that means is, as a planet, we have an interesting phenomenon, first time ever, and that is that the most developed economies, what we think of as the OECD economies, Europe, Japan, United States, Canada, Australia, right? Those countries which have been the most developed and therefore the greatest consumers of energy, the largest consumers of energy, and the largest producers of environmental degradation are being met and surpassed by more and more of the planet's population. So yes, it is the case that in the 1970s, the United States and the OECD economies together produced 75% of the planet's greenhouse gases that were eroding the population, eroding the environment of the planet. But today, because we're seeing so much development in the emerging economies, the actual share of environmental degradation is shifting from the developed economies to the emerging economies. And so that 75% that the United States and the OECD countries produced in the 1970s, today is only 50%. In the emerging economies, moving as quickly as they can, because they are trying to join the ranks of the big boy economies, right? When they got started, the planet's 18% of the planet's population was consuming more than 70% of the planet's energy and producing more than 40% of the planet's environmental degradation. And today, that 18% are trying not to displace the 82% are not trying to displace the 18%, they're trying to join them. They want to have grown-up chairs at the big boys' table. They're trying to say, hey, we are capable too. We can be part of the big boys club. Please let us in, right? We are capable. We are more educated, right? We still have more. We have more people today who can read and write than ever before on this planet. Unbelievable. At the same time, there's a discrepancy on the technology. There is still more than 2 billion people who've never made a phone call, but that's a whole different conversation. Funny, but different. Anyway, so the 82% are trying to join at the big boys table, right? And that means they want to do more, they want to consume more, they want to be just like the big guys. And that may mean I want to have a car. And that may mean I'm going to have to drive on more gas. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Now we've got a whole different situation. Now, if you look at the commitments of the Paris Accords from 2015, instead of everybody saying, well, it's all the rich guys' faults, right? The fact of the matter is the center of gravity is shifting from the developed economies to the emerging economies. And now we have a whole different psychology in what those negotiations could possibly look like as we try to get to the sort of cutoff point of being in 2050, by mid-century, cutting in half the global greenhouse gas emissions. How do you negotiate that? If the emerging economies are saying, hang on, you guys, you the fat cats, you the rich ones, you became industrialized, became powerful, became capable by burning fossil fuels. Now, when we're trying to do the same thing, we just want to be one of you, you're punishing us. And you're saying, oh, but don't do it the way we did it. So it must mean you don't want us to get ahead. See the difference? See the tension building already? Right? It's not that you don't want us to pollute, it's that you don't want us to be at your table. You want to discriminate against us. In the meantime, the emerging economies are holding the developed economies to a standard that says, you did all this disproportionately consuming the world's energy, disproportionately producing the world's pollution. The burden should fall disproportionately on you, the fat cats, the rich guys, to fix it. And that is not possible. That is physically not possible, strategically not possible, economically not possible, politically as a matter of policy, not possible. This has to be a global effort. And so that you can see where the hiccups are already in what these negotiations could possibly look like, right? And in fact, that is showing up. Especially after we left the Paris Accords last year, whole countries just said, you know, this isn't a serious thing. We don't have to, if they're not going to do it, we don't have to do it, right? If the number one consumer of energy and the number two polluter on the planet doesn't care, then we're just suckers if we follow this plan, right? So it is eroding sort of as people live and breathe each day. What are the factors that would have to be addressed if we were all going to be of one mind? We all get it that secure that building means X. We're all in the business of trying to get to X now. We're doing it. We've got it, right? Which is a hypothetical. We don't have that situation today. If that were the case, however, the number one thing, if there was only one thing we could do, we have a magic wand. If there's only one thing we can do with it, that one thing would be to get this planet off coal. It is the single largest producer of environmental degradation this planet has. When we talk about fossil fuels, we are overwhelmingly talking about oil, gas, natural gas, and coal. And of those three, coal is the number one source of environmental degradation. It's not subject to a lot of dispute or interpretation. It is acknowledged by all. The number one consumer of energy produced by burning coal is China. It uses more coal than the rest of the world combined. And while China is also the number one producer of renewable energies, most proudly in terms of wind and solar technologies. And they pride themselves on it legitimately. Everybody can go around saying, yes, yes, China's #1 in producing renewable energies. But while they're doing that, they are also building a new coal-fired electricity generating plant in China a week. A new plant a week. And they're not building these plants to last a week and a half. They're building these plants, as we would if we were doing it, to last as long as possible, to be as productive as long as possible, to last a good 30, 40, 50 years, right? Fast on their heels is India, which has openly stated that it is determined to do whatever it takes to bring modernization to its population, to all 1.43 billion of their population. They're going to do whatever it takes. And if that means, and this is Indian words on the record repeatedly, and if that means burning dirty, abundant coal, which India has, then we will do so. Because we are that determined to join the big boys table, to develop our technologies, to create vibrant businesses and opportunities for our many, many people in our population. I can't be running out of time already. Oh. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, so no surprise that if we look at the top 50 cities on the planet today with the worst population, the hottest cities, hot meaning heat, just temperature, right? All 50 of the world's worst 50 cities are in India. They are moving as fast as they can to modernize, to create a vibrant middle class. And already there are more middle class citizens in India than the United States has people. So they're moving out as fast as they can with whatever they can, right? And they're doing it with coal. Are they committed to getting off coal? Yeah, they are. Yeah. They wrote it, they signed. Yeah. Is China committed to getting off coal? Yep, they signed. Yeah, don't worry about it. Right? So you see how this is going to take shape at a negotiating table? This is going to be mean and bitter. This is going to be tough. Plus, the reality is you've got folks just openly walking away because there is no agreement at of the top two, right? China and the United States, over what the X is, what the secure that building means, and how they're going to get to it. And in the meantime, the number 2 polluter of the world is saying, and if you're not going to do this, we, the United States, will resume using more coal, clean coal. There's no such thing as clean coal. There is such a thing as cleaner coal. And we have the technologies to get to cleaner coal. It costs more, but we can do that. But there's no such thing as clean coal. But when you get the number 2 polluter saying, we're going to do coal, then why on earth is India and China having such a conniption? Right? So you see the problems. Okay, I am really worried about how I'm screwing up on time here. Just keep one quick thing in mind. The consumption of energy is in fact growing. We as a planet are today burning more coal, using more oil, more natural gas than we were when we all signed the Paris Accords in 2015. It's all going in the upward trajectory. And the analysts are saying that upward trajectory is going to stay an upward trajectory. There is no picture that gets us to getting off fossil fuels anytime soon, certainly not in our lifetimes. So we continue to be consuming energy using the baseline of fossil fuels by more than 80% of the total energy mix. So yes, wind technology is growing. Yes, solar technology is growing. They are the two fastest growing and abundant producers of new electricity on this planet. But order of magnitude problem, that means they're at roughly 8 to 9% each. That is to say that the order of magnitude of energy needed currently being consumed today throughout the planet, it's not just us, right, is still more than 80% dependent on fossil fuels. And this is the part that drives everybody crazy when it comes to the negotiating table. And the center of gravity is shifting from the developed economies to the emerging economies feeling shafted, feeling that it's all being used somehow against them to keep them from achieving what the big boys already have. It's not a zero-sum game, they insist. It kind of is, but that's a longer discussion. So just to keep that in mind, that the challenges of how to get past this, and we're just talking coal right now. The number 2 consumed source of energy is oil. And for that, the United States is out of control. We're out of control on the highways. It's unbelievable. And even when we all thought we were going to have Detroit moving on to a more environmentally responsible production line, we didn't know that what we were going to see instead was a massive, massive consumption of SUVs. Everybody has a show of hands. Anybody here have an SUV? Yeah. So, yeah, we want to be environmentally sound. We want to be responsible, sure. And yeah, I can put that in the back of my car. Just bring it along, right? You can see how this is confounding any policymaker in any capital anywhere on the planet. And we don't have, and seemingly can't find, at least not in a timely fashion, the what to replace fossil fuels with. So I'll give you an example. There's a town in the Midwest, there's always a town in the Midwest, right, that has one of those charming little schoolhouses, not quite a one-room schoolhouse, but you know what I mean. The thing based on which the whole American image of education and growth exists, right? And they decided that they needed a new schoolhouse. So the city council got together and they passed a resolution, resolved there should be a new schoolhouse. Yes, everybody agrees. That's the right thing to do. And then they decided, we want to be prudent about this. We don't want to get out ahead of ourselves. We want to be able to build it responsibly. Well, resolved that the materials to build the new schoolhouse should be taken from the existing schoolhouse. So we'll reuse the materials, and that'll be a smart and conservation thing to do. Yes, yes, everybody agrees. Yes, we passed that resolution. And then they thought, well, what are we going to do with the kids while we're building the schoolhouse? We've got another thought, another resolution everybody votes for. Resolved. The existing schoolhouse should remain in use until the new schoolhouse is built. You get it. You get it. Secure that building, why don't you? That's where we are on energy. We have to use the existing fossil fuels base while we are trying to get away from consuming fossil fuels to using something else, and we haven't identified the something else yet. So we're trying to change a flat tire on a car while we're going 50 miles an hour. And oh, by the way, we don't have a spare. That's where this dilemma has everybody, not just us, everybody. There's a whole longer, I mean, I've got 3 hours worth of examples to look at other stuff, because it's not just coal, it's not just oil, it's not just natural gas, although the United States has the best natural gas story. And if we had time, we would talk about that as well. But it's also how we produce environmental degradation. So that gets to farming. What do we use for fertilizers? How do we put additives into the ground, into the air, into the water? What do we do with the greenhouse gases emitted by farm animals? That's a whole wonderful, I've got great stories, wonderful conversation, but it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. We produce from our agricultural industry more degradation than ExxonMobil, Shell, and one other, I think it's Chevron, one other oil company. Just from producing food. Did we think we might get off food anytime soon? I don't think so, right? The one that I think really comes home most poignantly, and then I have to close off this segment, is air conditioning. Air conditioning. Last year, 2025, the United States, just the United States, used more electricity for air conditioning than the entire continent of Africa used for every form of electricity. All electricity used in the continent of Africa, we exceeded just to produce air conditioning. And the expectation is that today's level of consumption of energy to produce air conditioning will increase by 300% by the time we get to mid-century. So just keep that in mind, right? Okay, I have to get off this segment of the discussion, because I cannot allow myself for us to have a conversation talking about energy that doesn't include the U.S. involvement with Iran today. We just have to talk about it because it is profound. It's going to affect us, not just us, every capital. It's already engaging with people's livelihoods all over the world. So I have to just cover some of this. The hard part is, right now, we don't know what secure that building means between the United States, Israel, and Iran. We don't have a definition of the mission, not from strategic perspectives, not from political perspectives, not from environmental or economic perspectives. So the what are we about is not known. And when asked, how will we know when it's over? The response from the White House was, when I feel it in my bones. There is not a general, an admiral anywhere on this planet, but certainly not in the United States, that accepts that as a mission. You can't plan a war, and by golly, you can't plan when you're going to get out of it without knowing that. How do you know when you're done? And if you can't tell when you're done, how will you know if you're getting close? So the frustration there is very real. And not only are Americans frustrated with what is it we are about and how do we know if we're doing it well and if we're coming to closure, but it's affecting everybody else, including our closest allies, who also feel frustrated. Nobody told them, nobody consulted them, they didn't know, and now it's somehow their fault too. And so they're frustrated with us because they weren't involved, they weren't included. As a practical matter, just as a matter of straight logistics, global realities, the planet today consumes a little, right around 105 million barrels of oil every single day. We had a dip during COVID when the entire planet's economy shut down, and then nobody went anywhere. They didn't go to the movies, they didn't eat out. All they did was basically sit home and they drank. No, the liquor bill of the country was, anyway. So what we had was a little dip in energy use during COVID, but right after that we shot right back up and surpassed previous consumption levels before that. So we are now at world rates of consuming oil. 105 million barrels of oil a day. Just under 40% of all the globally traded oil on this planet comes from a piece of geography called the Middle East. I just happen to spend a lot of my time in the Middle East. Of that 40%, all the globally traded oil must traverse one or more of three choke points. They are the Suez Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Strait of Hormuz. And of those three choke points, the Strait of Hormuz is the largest, and slightly more than 20% of all the globally traded oil every single day comes through the Strait of Hormuz. In February 27 of this year, between 130 and 150 ships daily were traversing the Strait of Hormuz. Today, we think we got 2 through yesterday. 2. The planet that relies so heavily on fossil fuels, so it's not just oil, it's foodstuffs going in, refined products as well as crude oil coming out, all kinds of commercial trading going on, passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That commerce has now essentially frozen. The Strait of Hormuz remains open. It is open. However, if ships believe that Iran or anybody else wishes to stop traffic through this tiny little strait, then that shipper is saying, I better have really good insurance behind me just in case I'm not allowed to get through. It's the insurers who are saying, hang on, if there's a chance you're going to get stopped, we're not going to insure that. You're operating with full knowledge, are you not? We'll just let somebody else go first. Let somebody else traverse the area. Let's see if they're allowed through. If they're allowed through, we'll talk about it. But you don't get an automatic buy. You don't get an automatic pass. You don't get a, oh, sure, from the insurance guy that it's okay, right? Now, back when a Chinese cargo ship ran aground in the Suez Canal, remember that? Lloyd's of London was the only insurer that stayed in the game because the backup of cargo ships going to Europe from Asia and to Asia from Europe was a nightmare. Everything was stuck, right? And what happened was Lloyd's of London was producing their statistics, doing their analysis. And what they said was for every ship not traversing the Suez Canal, the backup to the commercial traffic alone, just no hostility, there was no war, the thing ran aground, right? Was costing the combined insurance industry more than $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day. And that ship ran aground and stayed stuck for something like 16 days. In the meantime, all the other commerce was also stuck, had no way of moving. Now we're talking about hostility. It is deliberate. It's not there's a sandbar in the ground. Now we're talking about somebody saying, you can't come through here because I won't let you. I won't let you means I can hurt your ability to move altogether. I can take out your ship. I can disable it. I can simply board it and take all the crew. There are today 22,000 ship crew people stuck on all these ships inside the Gulf that is on the Turkish side, so to speak, in that direction of the Strait of Hormuz. They're just stuck. They can't get out. They can't go in. They're using up their own supplies, right? In the meantime, because there are hostilities, the commercial hubs that were very self-consciously developed in Abu Dhabi and Dubai in particular had to freeze all air traffic. Freeze all air traffic. And they have been spending decades to be the hub. If you are in Europe and you want to go to India, you're going to have to stop in Dubai. If you're in Africa and you want to go to France, you're going to have to stop in Dubai. They deliberately invited the development of their region as a traffic hub. It's, think about Atlanta. Everybody has to go to Atlanta just to go from one part of Georgia to another part of Georgia. It's crazy, right? But to be that hub meant commercial success. And they guaranteed, the way this worked was they guaranteed safety. Well, they couldn't guarantee safety anymore. They had to freeze all air traffic. So even if you could get off one of these ships that you're stuck on, where are you going to go? And how are you going to get there? So the nightmare, just on the basis of humanitarian, what are you going to do with people who are stuck? They're not part of the conflict at all. And so at one point we had an offer. The United States would facilitate safe passage. Why? Because the United States stands for free passage, safe passage and open navigation. That's what we stand for, have stood for all this time, right? And Iran, and we should not, however complex people see the circumstances, please don't go to something that all human beings want to do and put white hats and black hats on people. Iran is not a white hat country. The regime in Iran is black hat. Let's not pretend that we've created a different scene there. What happens is Iran says, hang on, if you think you want to pass us, you'll pay a fee, a transit fee, age-old thing, right? And we're charging you $2 million per ship. And at that point, we had another very unattractive development. When the United States said, oh, you know, if we went in partnership with Iran, we could share the proceeds. At that point, the shippers said, hang on, what happened to open seas and free navigation? Now the United States is going to charge as well as Iran? Oh no, right? This proves how unreliable this whole situation is. We're going to be charged? No. Yesterday, we were going to be given safe passage and a safe escort by the Americans, right? And that just turned around overnight? How can that be? To be fair to the White House, it backed away immediately from saying we'll share in the proceeds. But they did say it. And it was heard. More than the fact that we said it, it was heard by every ally and every adversary. So the challenge of the what and the how are very much out there. The painful part in terms of our diplomatic relationships, how does the world view the United States in all of this? Because number one, the United States did not consult its closest allies. It just went in. So February 27, there is normal, so to speak, trafficking through the Strait of Hormuz of 130 to 150 ships. Now we're at none, even though the Strait of Hormuz has not closed. And that's because people no longer believe that it's going to be safe. They're not sure it's going to be safe. It is not reliable to hear from anybody, even the Americans, don't worry, it'll be safe. And so at that point, the frustration is acute. And the perception of the United States is increasingly that the United States is a bully. They didn't tell anybody. They went barging in, bombed the Jesus out of somebody else, which then is so unhappy that it starts bombing even its own neighbors. So even though the United Arab Emirates, home to both Abu Dhabi and Dubai, did not attack Iran, but it has bases where Americans are. UAE gets attacked. Qatar gets attacked. Qatar is particularly aggrieved because not only have they been attacked by Iran, they were also attacked by Israel during the Hamas talks aftermath. Kuwait has been attacked. We have troops in Kuwait. We have bases in Kuwait. Oman has been attacked. Every one of our allies in that stretch, and they're all neighbors to Iran, and they've been saying forever, don't ask too much of us because we have to live in this neighborhood. We have to live with these guys. Well, now 80 facilities in this region, in these countries, which are allies to us and neighbors to Iran, have been hit. And they weren't just hitting U.S. establishments. They were hitting refineries. They were hitting ports, receiving facilities and outgoing facilities in these ports, right? And what does that mean? In the case of Qatar, which has huge natural gas operations, largely done with Exxon and Mobil, the damage is such that right now the analysts are saying it will take 3 to 5 years to rebuild those refining capacities. 3 to 5 years. So let's assume that this is all over. The building has been secured as soon as we've identified where the building is, what it's doing, and so on. We've secured that building. It's all over now. We can turn on production again. No, that isn't how it works. It's not a switch you can flip. It will take time. This is yet another example of why 9 women cannot make a baby in 1 month. Some things take time, right? Classic case. So we are looking at outwards of months to years if there can be something called normal commerce in the area of commodities called energy. Even if we accept entirely that there's no contest between fossil fuels and renewables, we just give up. The only people who are on track are China, and they're still living off coal. Even if we give up just to get back to the fossil fuels that now the planet consumes at 80% of its total energy mix, we can't get back to that. Even if everything is considered Jake, we're done, everything is cool, we won, they won, everybody's happy. It doesn't get turned back on. We don't get to whatever normal was, and maybe a new normal is what we have to learn to live with. Which allows me to close with the wisdom of the world's greatest philosopher, Yogi Berra. The future just isn't what it used to be. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a few questions. So who would like to begin? Okay.
Thank you very much. Eye-opening. I understand that the largest agency that provides financing to mitigate climate change is the World Bank Group. They committed $44.9 billion for this purpose. However, the U.S. government, Treasury especially, has now dictated to the World Bank, and by the way, the IMF, to cease and desist from financing climate change because they want the World Bank and IMF to get much more involved in infrastructure. What do you think about that development?
The United States has been a major contributor, not only as an architect, but substantial planner and participant in the work of the IMF. It has traditionally held sway. It is a challenge to the IMF that other board members would be anxious about. It's a controversial matter. The money has already been designated and the like. But the United States certainly has the consistency of saying we're doing this as a national matter as well. So it's not just making everybody else do something that we are not doing. We have closed our own science-based approach on climate change. And that's true. We have. The EPA is gone. The proposals for maintaining a monitoring system on where our science tells us the degradation of the planet's atmosphere is headed and how fast. So yes, we are doing it to ourselves, and demanding that it be done internationally has with it the threat that, or we don't have to contribute, and we'll just take our marbles and go home. So like it, don't like it, it is something that the United States can do, and others know it. And we are playing that tough game all over. So if Germany says the United States is being humiliated by Iran, we'll show them, we'll take our troops out. So much for NATO. And so the challenge to NATO is yet more underscored. I think the one damage that nobody anticipated with respect to NATO, by the way, was our strong attempt to buy or take Greenland. The Europeans do not forgive us for that. They said, Iran, that's a war, that's your war. We weren't consulted, we aren't part of it. You want to be pissy about it and bring the whole global economy down, well, that's on your head. But Europe and NATO and the commitments that we have all lived by, that's unforgivable. And so the United States has got real problems there. But it doesn't mean we can't keep playing this game.
Thank you. Didn't realize it was. Is there any effort with all of this confusion and tie-up in the oil industry and the supply of oil, has it generated more attention to finding alternatives?
Good for you. Good question.
Thank you very much.
There are plenty of folks who are now saying absolutely what the signals to us is that we are not just late, we are way overdue in getting off fossil fuels. And the problem there is the science for further development. There are lots and lots of things out there. People have got, algae in mind, and they've got fusion in mind, and we're doing nuclear. The Japanese are going to revive nuclear. Their unhappy experience with Fukushima notwithstanding, in the same way that we're reviving coal. It's the same kind of thing. We've got to diversify our resources, diversify that which we are so dependent upon. And in fact, the ground that we deliberately ceded, we deliberately said we will not allow the foreign electric vehicle commerce to come into the United States from China. BYD in China now has, for 1 year alone, a 140% increase in its sales of its electric vehicles. They have taken over the world. So you're absolutely right. People are looking for alternatives. And as a practical matter, as any planner of any resource would tell you, the dangers of being dependent on one or two resources, like talking to Germany today about relying so heavily on Russian gas. We didn't talk about Russia. Oh my God. Well, okay. Okay, so it's that same kind of thing. It's that same kind of thing. If you're heavily dependent on one resource, one avenue, try to diversify. So in addition to trying to look for non-fossil fuel options, put more effort into renewables and alternatives, we're also seeing a big push for diversifying routes of transport. Can you get oil from this same region out to the marketplace through some other means? And so people are looking at that as well. It's going to be costly, it's going to be time consuming, but so what isn't? The idea is ultimately, can you get to a point where being diversified protects you, insulates you from some of these volatile activities? But yes, absolutely, that's going on. That kind of thinking is going on.
Yeah, the question that I was going to ask is somewhat related. And in a way, I feel a little nervous about bringing it up, given the problem we're looking at in Iran in terms of nuclear energy. But at one point, there was the option that in the US and other places, and they've tried it in places, that we could focus more on small-scale nuclear energy plants. And I wonder, is that still on the agenda? And what are the things that are holding it up?
Good for you. Absolutely. Absolutely, that's on the agenda. One of the interests motivating smaller and in some cases mobile nuclear power generation is out of protection, so that we wouldn't be a sitting duck with a bullseye painted on us. And so that maybe we could move, and we could also respond to places that have had traditional power sources knocked out, maybe from a hurricane or a tornado or something like that. So yeah, the generated motivation for looking at small mobile nuclear installations has been around for some time. And yes, there is an impetus to hype that up, to speed it up, to enhance the development sooner rather than later. Two kinds of things come up. One is NIMBY, not in my backyard, where people say, yeah, that's fine over there, just not in my backyard, not near my grandkids' school, not by any water source, not near any major thoroughfares or highways, not in, you get the picture. The other is that it is not currently popular with the administration, which is putting a lot of focus on traditional fossil fuels, in particular, looking at reinstalling and modernizing our coal installations.
Well, Molly, let me claim privilege and ask you a Foreign Service-related question.
Oh, sure.
Both are alumni of that. There's a lot of work that's going to, repair work that's going to have to be done. But what is your perspective on what can be done?
You mean in the industry of energy production, or in the Foreign Service infrastructure, or?
No, I meant in the Foreign Service infrastructure.
Oh. You sure you wouldn't want to talk about energy infrastructure? It's more positive. I fear for the future of diplomacy, for the immediate future, at a time when we need our diplomatic skills now more than ever before. I'm working on a whole different presentation on negotiation and what is involved. It is not a negotiation to say, damn it, I said give up. That doesn't get you a deal. And so what it takes involves huge investment in learning where the other guys are coming from, And that means learning their language, caring about their priorities, understanding what their stumbling blocks are, and looking for, and this is not possible in today's world, looking for areas of compromise where I get what I need and you get what you need and we can live together. That the mutuality and reciprocity principles continue to obtain in negotiation, and we're not seeing any of that right now. What we're seeing is Iran insisting the United States must leave the area entirely and pay us reparations, and the Americans are saying, give up already. It's not producing for us. So I worry about that. We now have a sad situation where the Foreign Service universe has been heavily decimated. They've counted up the numbers, hundreds of years of language training that are lost through the latest RIF of 250 people. We are in real trouble. If right now Iran called us, we wouldn't have a Farsi speaker to answer the phone.
Molly, thank you very much. You've done us a huge favor. You've complicated our thinking.
Secure that building.
But thank you very much for really a brilliant presentation.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.